Hi all, Jason here. Today we're going to talk about the MIDI switcher board that we have available on the website. So what the MIDI switcher is all about is giving you, the builder, the ability to control, relay states, complex settings inside your amp, and have them stored as presets which you can recall with MIDI program change messages. The chip also allows you to control features inside your amp using control change messages, and it's pretty straightforward to program it. So in this video we're going to spend a little bit of time just kind of detailing how you would actually install this thing, how it works, and importantly how to program it once you've got it in. So here's the MIDI board here. You can see it's quite small and it'll fit easily into the chassis of the amp that you're building. I'll put up a close-up of the chip right here in the video so you can see it. Right, effectively what we have here is 8 ins and 8 outs grouped into two groups of 4. Right, so you can think of it like there's 4 channel controls and 4 toggles to control things like boosts, and maybe structure switches, gain structure, that kind of stuff, right? So 4 channels and then 4 options. Another use of an option could be to switch an effects loop in and out using a relay, obviously. So with the 8 inputs, you can control 8 relays on the other side of it, or 8 switching states. So you can control more than one relay off one of the switching states. But 4 channels, and they work as exclusive, so one of the 4 switches will be active. With the toggles, they operate completely independently, so you could have select channel 2 and then completely independently activate 2 toggles, and you could have all of that stored as a preset actually. The way that you activate the relays that are controlled by the MIDI switcher is through a momentary switch, right? So you ground the input momentary. It's not latching. You just you will wire up a switch which will be have one pole of the switch connected to the board, and the other pole of the switch will be connected to ground. And when you hit that switch, remember it's not latching, you'll send a ground pulse to the input of the board, and that will then activate the output, and it will control the relay state. So when controlling our main boards, now this is our MTL board, it's got 5 relays on it, right? And we do have others that are like this, like the mini board also has a lot of relays and a lot of switching activity on it. You can control these with a traditional foot switch, of course, right? But this is where MIDI really comes into play, because you've got 5 relays that you could potentially control here, and having them all activate simultaneously with one program change message in MIDI it's a good option, right? And I've installed this in a bunch of my own amps, and I find it really useful. We also have these tiny little relay auxiliary boards. So I've got this is a 1 relay unit, I've got a 2 relay unit, and I've got a 3 relay unit as well. The 3 relay unit is up on the website actually. So when if you're looking to mod an existing amp and you really want to get sophisticated with MIDI, you can add these little relay boards to house your relays, and then use the MIDI switcher to control them all. I'm not sure whether you can see this on the video, but this is a 28-pin AT-Mega16 chip. This is the brains of the MIDI switcher. So if you were to purchase a MIDI switcher board from us on the website, you don't just get the PCB. What you get is the PCB with this chip loaded with the firmware, sitting in a socket, right, on the board. So everything you need, other than the usual capacitors and resistors, the bill of materials. The bill of materials is obviously included, and so you can buy the rest of the components easily. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to use my XFX3 to send MIDI messages, and I'll show you how we actually program the chip for your settings. Just kind of pretend that the XFX3 is like a MIDI foot controller, or whatever you're using to send MIDI messages, and I've got a little test board set up here which we'll put up on screen, and you'll get the idea from that about how this thing works and how you'll use it to control relays in your amp and how to program it. Okay guys, so I've just got a test set up here. This is my first generation MIDI PCB. This is the one that's on sale in the store. You can see it's substantially smaller. The key difference really is that this first generation one had rectification diodes and quite a large filter cap over on this side of the board. So that would be in the event that you needed to create a DC supply for the chip. Right. Now, the reason I removed that from the second generation board is that I figured that, look, if you've got relays in your amp, then you're going to have a DC supply already. So no need to double up, I guess. So look, there are still a few of these larger ones that I've got. So if that's the one you want, just let me know if you go through and order one. Otherwise, you'll get this one here, which is a bit smaller. And it's kind of laid out. It's just a bit more tidy in its layout. Now, what I've actually done here, and this is the little test harness that I use. This is the an ASP programmer. So this is how I actually load the firmware onto the chip. I actually use this PCB. And what I've actually done here is soldered in 4 two-state LEDs. So these LEDs can go green or red. They are bi-color LEDs, and so I use this as a test harness, right? So if the LED is activated, you can think of that as a relay being the relay coil being active. Because what I'm actually doing here is this is the outputs on the bottom of the PCB here, and if the MIDI signal incoming, causes one of the relays to latch and turn on, then the LED will turn on instead. So just a bit more of a kind of a visual way of representing it. But what we're doing here is driving LEDs, but you just got to think of it in terms of a relay. Okay, and what I'm doing with my X edit here is I'm using a MIDI block to send MIDI signals to the board. Now, just bear with me here. I'm not sure if this is the best way to do it in the X, but look, it's working for me. I've actually got these set up. So I've got 2 scenes set up for the MIDI block. Scene 1, I've got the first 4 program slots. So let's just, for this example here, let's just say I'm setting up 4 presets, right? Preset 0, 1, 2, 3, my 4 presets. These are control change messages. 104 allows you to store your current setting, all right? And 102 is a full reset and wipe of all the memory, all right? So on these chips is EEPROM memory. So you can store presets to the chip, you can power off the amp, have no power to the chip, and you power the amp back on, your setting will still be stored in this thing. If you send a control change 102 message to the chip, everything will be reset back to, let's call it, factory setting. Now in the documentation folder set out for these MIDI switcher boards, I've written up, a couple of pages of documentation that describe exactly how this all works, and I've got all of these program change or control change messages that you would use to program the chip. So let's say I'm going to store a configuration or a setting, a set of relay settings into program 1, right? So this guy here. What you do is you select that program slot via a MIDI message. Then you would dial in your settings on your amp. So let's assume you've got switches on the front of the amp, right? And you'll set those to, what amp channel you want and other options that you've got that the MIDI board can control. And then you will save it by hitting 104. So let's just do a test of that, right? Bear in mind, just for the purposes of using this X interface, I'm having to set the channels. This is the MIDI channel, right? my chip is set to MIDI channel 1, and I've set these two scenes here to channel 2 so that it doesn't control the board, because I didn't realise this at the time, but the way the axe works, this MIDI block sends all of these messages when you change scenes. So I'm going from scene 1 here to scene 2. It was sending all of these messages out to my board, and some crazy stuff was happening. So to work around that, I've set everything to channel 2, and then when I go to the scene and I want to use it, I'll set these to channel 1 so that the board will pick it up, because it's only listening on MIDI channel 1. I hope that makes sense. So what we've done here, I'm going to go to select this channel 1, and I'm going to hit test. So that's now sent to the board that I wanted to select MIDI program slot number 1. Okay, so let's just set this back to 2. Now I'm going to go to scene 2, and here I'm going to use change control messages to set some states. Now these are all set out in the documentation, right? So change control number 86 selects channel number 2. So let's test that. There we go. All right. So the way the LEDs are set out, it's, green is 1 and red is 2, and then you go to here 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, green, red, green, red, green, red. And let's set some toggle states here. So I will use this one. Okay, so with that set, I've selected channel 2, and I've set on one of the toggles. So these toggles, as I mentioned before, could just be like, turning the effects loop on or off. Maybe you've got a boost function on the amp. It could be setting a gain structure, or a cathode bypass cap being switched in and out, anything like that. 4 channels and 4 toggle states. That's what these 4 are. So these are channel 1, 2, 3, 4, and the 4 different toggle states. So now I've got that set. Now before I move back to scene 1 to store it, I'm just going to set these onto MIDI channel 2 again, so that I don't send messages to the board that I don't want to go. Okay, now I'm going to store this preset, alright, and to store the preset is 104. So let's do that. Going to MIDI channel 1, I'm going to send the signal. Now that should be stored now into program slot number 1. So if I just set these 4 channels to MIDI channel 1, or 4 presets I should say. So this is program 1, 2, 3, 4. Right, so I've selected program 2, right, which is in its default state of just channel 1 selected and no options. So if I go back to channel 1, you'll see my presets now recalled. Okay, program change 2, back to what it was, and I go to program change 1, and it's recalled what I had saved. Alright, so that's all happy days there. So let me just do another one. So now I'm going to, let's select program slot number 3, or 0, 1, 2. I call it 1, 2, 3, right? MIDI's a bit like that. Depending on the device you're using, they start at 0 or they start at 1. Let's just call this program slot number 3. So there you go, I've just recalled it. I'll just set these to MIDI channel 2 for the reason that I outlined before. I don't want it, when I flick back to that scene, I don't want it sending messages. Or I don't want the messages to be recognised anyway. So I am on MIDI channel, not MIDI channel, I'm on program 3. I'm going back to the second scene here, and I will select, let me select this as channel 4 on my amp, and I'll set one of these other toggles here. There you go, that one. Now that those are set, I'm going to go back and save them, right? So remember, I'm on program 3. I'm going to go back to scene 1, and I'm going to save this into slot 3. Saved. Okay. So now, if I activate these again by putting them onto MIDI channel 1, these are my MIDI programs, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. Now 1, remember we had saved a setting into it, so let me recall it. There it is. 2 I had left at the default. Recall, there it is. 3 was the one we just saved, and there it is. And 4 is still the default. Okay, so there's, I've got, 2 saved, and I can just flick them back and forward on these now. And once you've got one set, if I recall this program here, bear in mind, imagine that you've hit that on your foot switch, right, and you've recalled this setting on your amp. You can then use these control messages to further change options. Yeah. So you can imagine, again, this could be flicking relays back and forward that are setting in, boosts and all sorts of wonderful things that you've configured on your amp. Alright, I hope that's helpful, guys. I might do one further section here where I show you how to do this on the amp itself. Alright, what we're looking at here is my personal MTL build, which has the MIDI board installed in it. And one thing I should point out, of course, is that you can control the switching on the MIDI board using panel switches as well. Right, so it's not just through MIDI control. And the nice thing about using the MIDI board for your panel switches is that they do not need to be hard switches like this. I mean, this one here is the mid shift for the EQ. I don't have that on the MIDI board, as you can probably figure out. It's just a normal switch. But here I've got soft press buttons. They don't latch back and forward. This is the momentary top style switch, right? All this is doing is sending an instantaneous ground pulse to the MIDI board, and you can see what I said at the beginning, right? There's 4 ins, there's 8 inputs, 4 for the channels and 4 for toggle states. So here I'm actually only using 3, right? So I can use it to change the channel back and forward. So I'm going from the lead channel to the rhythm channel, and then for each channel I've got a boost mode. Okay, so simple like that. And then just like we were with the little test system there with the LED lights, I can send MIDI messages to the amp and have it change channels or change configurations. So here I am sending different program change messages to the amp, right? So this is program change 1, so it's location 1 in my memory on the board. This is 2, this is program 3 and program 4, and you can see I've got it set out quite a logical, right? So rhythm no boost, rhythm with boost, lead no boost, and lead with boost. And of course you can just flip it back and forward at will. So you can imagine if I was controlling that with a foot switch, I've got 4 presets, if you like, that I can recall with one press of my foot. Now I'm just going to move these back to MIDI channel 2 because I'm about to change the scenes here. Actually, what I'll do is I'll select, I'm on program 4, so that's cool. I'll leave that on program 4. And I'll show you how to change it, right? So let's assume that I'm setting this up from scratch. And what I would actually do is I would set in on the amp what I want. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to set up program 4, which as you saw was my lead channel with the lead boost on. I'll set it up as a rhythm channel with the rhythm boost on. So now that I've configured that, I'm going to save it. And to save, you've got to send control change message 104, right, which I've just done. So let's set that to 2 again. I'll set these program change messages back to MIDI channel 1, and let's go through the channels, right? So let's go. There's my channel 1, or program 1 I should say, not channel 1, program 1, program 2, program 3, right? And now before, program 4 was lead channel with booster on, so let's select volume, let's select program 4 now, and look at that, it's saved, or it recalled the preset that I just saved. So, you know, send your program change message to the amp, dial in your setting, send it control change 104, that saves it, and you're done. Then you can recall it. It's as easy as that. Hope this is helpful, guys. As always, if you've got any questions, please post them on our Facebook community DIY build group. I'll be happy to answer questions there, as will others who have built with this MIDI board. Cheers!